Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Chessable Masters 2022. It's the fourth tournament in the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour of the 2022 season, and today we are going to be covering some pretty awesome games from the knockout. 8 players have made it out of the initial 16. The matchups in the quarterfinal were Magnus Carlsen versus David Anton Guijarro. Magnus was the winner. Anish Giri took on Ariantari from Norway. Anish Giri won that matchup. Pragg defeated Wei Yi, which was a massive win, and Ding Liren defeated Shahryar Mamedyarov. So we have the semifinals today, and obviously, as always, we have to name the video something. And Magnus today was playing some unbelievable opening ideas, which we just have to look at. I mean, it's Magnus is like a professor, you know, kind of like going over certain variations that really these top guys aren't going into, and trying to put a little bit of spice, a little bit of flair, a little bit of you know, he's like a chef, a professor and a chef and a chess player all in one. And he begins against Ding Liren with knight f3. Now, Magnus has already said Ding Liren is a top 2 favorite in the candidates, and you know, he personally would be very interested in taking him on. And Ding Liren here plays a very normal setup. He puts 2 pawns in the center, not a third one because it's not defended. And Magnus now has a choice here with this ready opening. And ready is one of the most flexible openings that exists, one of the most solid. I really don't recommend low-rated players play it because it's too solid and too flexible, and the game plans are just kind of way too not clear-cut. But people like it. So he can choose which way to go, and he chooses to play d4. And here Ding Liren takes a very direct approach. He does not develop this knight. He just attacks the knight out of the middle. What's interesting is that because he played e6 and then e5, he's wasting a little bit of time. But the way Magnus played this, his knight gets booted to b3. Now, this structure resembles a Grunfeld defense. So what does that mean? Well, normally black plays knight f6, g6, and d5, okay? So just so you understand the meta that we're talking about here, the Grunfeld defense, these knights hit each other, okay? So the knight has something to trade off against when it is kicked out of the middle with the e-pawn, okay? Are you following me? No? That's okay. But sometimes you don't have a knight there. And so when that happens, the knight has to rotate to the queen side. It doesn't have an opportunity to liquidate itself. And that is why Ding Liren did that. Because if Ding Liren had a knight on c6, then this would allow the knight to liquidate and would allow the bishop to pressure. But because he doesn't have the knight there, he's able to play like this, where his center stays intact. And if Magnus plays just a couple more moves, like developing bishop g5, Ding will play knight d7, castle, and be totally okay. So what does Magnus do? Well, he injects a steroid shot of Stockfish idea to the position, and he plays the move f4. Okay, so he's trying to pounce on the position before Ding Liren is able to consolidate, okay? So for example, if Ding Liren castles here, of course he just loses his e-pawn and then this pawn as well. If in this position Ding plays the move e4, which looks very natural, oh, I'm blocking this bishop out, then Magnus will play f5, kicking out the bishop. And then he will follow it up with the absolutely absurd engine idea g4. Maybe he would have played bishop g5, but g4 as well. And now you're threatening to remove the knight from the defense of the center, and then the whole center collapses. I mean, the fact that white can play like this is only possible because he has the lead in development, and he's castled. And when you don't have anything in the center, like Magnus does right now, then you can attack the center. If your pieces stare at the center, you don't have any pawns there, you have eyes on the center of the board. And it's very different to fight against the center defended by pawns than a center defended by pieces, because pieces can really be deflected out. So Ding Liren takes, and then now Magnus again threatens this f5 move. So Ding plays g6, Magnus plays knight d4, Ding plays knight c6. He's like, all right, well, now I'm ready for this because you've kind of brought your knight back. Now, Magnus doesn't do that. He doesn't take the knight. He chooses to go for the bishop pair, which is a logical decision, as you see the dog behind me. It's a logical decision. And now Magnus plays king h1. All of this so far is following Stockfish's top line. So Magnus did not invent this, obviously. In fact, I think this position has been reached by people who play correspondence chess. So if you check the database, like for example, I mean, I have ChessBase. I pay for ChessBase. Most title players will pay for ChessBase. There's a correspondence base, which is when people use engine and then they have like, you know, 24 hours, 1 week to make a move. This position has been reached before. And the best moves here are moving the queen and castling. So black just accepts the fact that they have kind of a weird structure. White plays king h1 to get the king off of, you know, the diagonal here, this diagonal. And then white is ready to play e4. Ding Liren plays king f7. The reason that king f7 is a human move is that you defend your pawns. You keep the pawns defended, and you do the same thing as castling, basically. And the king is not really able to be attacked because the knight can't jump to these squares. But now, Magnus blows up the center of the board. D4, knight e4, and he's inviting Ding to trade queens. The invitation is there. And then if Ding is like, well, I want to trade all the rest of the pieces as well, well, then Magnus is going to develop. And look at this. I mean, that's just horrible to deal with. Like, that's just... Not to mention, on top of that, you got, like, weak pawns. Potentially e6, big weakness. Queenside majority, which could become a 3-on-1. You might just straight up have a 3-on-1 over there. And yeah, it's just a very unpleasant position. So instead of that, Ding Liren doesn't do that. He plays bishop f6, doesn't trade queens, and just backs up and sacrifices the pawn on b7. And so Magnus played about 15 moves. Benji. Good boy. Benji, after the groomer, has a bit of an irritation. I don't know why you have to know this. And he's been very naughty. He's been licking it, which I'm sure all dogs do. And yesterday I bought him a neck pillow so he would stop. Anything you purchase on the internet is just like 80% chance it's complete garbage. And yeah, it was just like a balloon on his like neck, and he just got out of it because it was just way too big. Anyway, now that little... I know. There's like probably like 1% of the viewing audience is like, I don't want to know about that. Focus on the game. So, rook b8. Magnus played like 17 moves of stockfish backed analysis. And I actually think he made an inaccuracy somewhere here. I think he had to play bishop e3. And because of the way he played this, he never played the move bishop e3, he just grabbed the pawn. Ding consolidates in a most incredible fashion. So if you take a look at this position, now Magnus plays bishop e3. Ding is down a pawn. Yes, he has 5 pawns versus 4, right? Well, he has 4 pawns versus 5. But Magnus cannot make any more progress. Ding found a way to perfectly coordinate his position. And the b pawn, which is known as the poison pawn in many positions, after it got taken, just opened up the floodgates on the queen side. So you can't move anything on the queen side because anything you move will weaken something else. And Ding is able to stabilize. And then a few moves later get his pawn back. And I mean, we just end up trading some pieces. Ding in this game focused on activity. That's what he did. He was down a pawn for a lot of the game, but he was able to trade off just enough and timely enough that he was able to liquidate Magnus. And this is one of the reasons why Ding is considered the biggest threat to him, because he doesn't crumble when Magnus gets everything he wants from the opening. However, after they drew the second rapid game, keep in mind it's a mini match of 4 rapid games, Magnus, this game, uncorked. This was disgusting, okay? So he went back to the ready. The difference this time is he played the move d3, so we have actually a King's Indian attack. And then Magnus plays e4. Now, to the untrained eye, that's a pawn loss. Like, he's just losing a pawn. So d4, queen d1, rook d1, knight e4. It looks just like a loss of a pawn. It's not. Your idea here is that you're going to get the activity and then play like knight c3, knight b5, knight c7, etc. And you're going to be like... you're going to try to monitor your dog in the middle of the recap. You're going to be like, all right, well, you know, I got pressure. I'm going to go in there with my knight. Magnus here plays bishop f4, which just, again, loses a pawn. But then, you're not going to believe this, he sacrifices a second pawn. Bishop c7. Now you might ask yourself, isn't the knight hanging? Yes, but then this is hanging. And if you take that, the knight will get out. But he sacked 2 pawns. He's just down 2 pawns. 5 to 7. I've never seen something like this before. I was trying to check the database. I think an idea similar was played one time. So Magnus just goes into a position. He's 2 pawns down on like move 15. But he's better. He's better. He just straight up has an advantage. Plays a5. What does black do? If Ding plays e5, trying to move his light squared bishop, Magnus plays a6. Game is over. Okay, so Ding has to address that first. Now Magnus plays rook a3, hits the bishop. Bishop's got to go. Bishop goes. Now Magnus plays bishop back to b6. Okay, c5 pawn is hanging. Let's defend it. Rook c3. So now Magnus is going to win the pawn back, right? You would think. e5, trying to break out. Whoa. So he's not even interested in the pawn. Okay? Because if he relieves the pressure, Ding is going to go here in b6. And then if you take your second pawn, maybe bishop e6, b6, like, you give it a couple of moves, black is completely fine. So rather than even engaging in that, Magnus is just applying more pressure. The bishops and the queen side is locked down. The center is locked down. The rooks pressure the center. Black cannot move a piece. Bishop goes to g4, and now Ding begins inviting tactical complications. All right, rook d2, fe5, Ding plays f5 and f4, and I think this was Magnus's biggest advantage of the game. He plays rook c3, f4, check here, and rook c4. And I mean, Ding is just trying to hold it all together. I mean, he's got a science project that is falling apart, and my man is trying to use crazy glue. Like it's Gorilla Glue? What is it called? Crazy glue? I don't know. But he's trying to hold it all together, all right? He plays the move g5. Bishop d6 by Magnus gets the pass pawn. That pawn is 2 squares away from becoming a queen. The bishop will move. The white rooks will coordinate. Ding is defending. gf4, gf4. This is Magnus's biggest advantage of the game. I think here he had to play king f2. If I remember correctly. King f2. And I like, again, the constant threat of winning this, combined with... you know, just the opportunity to walk up to the f-pawn and take it. Magnus decided to do it this way, and if you ask why did he not take on b7 straight away, I think he's just concerned about counterplay. He doesn't want to allow Ding to get any sort of counterplay, right? Because this does look scary. Computer doesn't find it scary, human finds it scary. Because this doesn't look like, again, we just talked about this poison pawn. All right, Magnus had a bad experience taking a b-pawn not so long ago. And Ding here just finds a way. And in the span of 2 moves, because Magnus inaccurately played the position, Ding consolidates with his rooks, and all of a sudden, actually, it's Ding Liren who is better. Like I said, Ding here could have also played actively, could have played rook g2, but he decides not to take any risk. He brings his king all the way. Notice how the last 3 moves in the middle of an endgame are just bringing the king, okay? And we get to a position of a rook endgame, which Ding Liren very comfortable in rook endgames. I mean, all of them are comfortable. All these guys are comfortable in endgames, but they trade everything. And for a second time in a row, Ding deals with Magnus's stockfishness, and you know, Magnus uncorking some insane opening ideas against the guy who is emotionless, rock solid, playing these games at like 2:30 in the morning, you know. And now Ding is like, my turn. My turn to put some pressure. We have a Slav defense, a quiet Slav, slow Slav, e3 variation. Here the main line is bishop f5, but Magnus plays bishop g4. Ding attacks the light-scored bishop, and Magnus decides to give it away and put up this structure. So Magnus has one of the most solid opening structures that exists. It's called the triangle defense versus the queen's pawn opening. This also resembles the semi-Slav variation, but normally in the semi-Slav, the light-scored bishop is still on c8. It just either gets out, you know, slowly, or really not at all. I mean, it depends on if black takes on c4 and plays b5. Now, white is always better here. Why? White has the bishop pair, and also white has more space. So white is always slightly better, but Magnus is really not interested in all that. He's just... I mean, he's just developing his pieces very, very comfortably. Now, if you take a quick look at this position, the bishop was brought out to b4 probably to make a decision at some point, right? So in these positions, when black is super passive, if black stays passive the whole game and both sides just make improving moves, the person with more space will be able to improve their position faster and in a more fatal way. If black improves his position here, black is already worse, so if you improve your position, you're just equal. If the person with a better position improves their position, they're going to get a completely winning position. That's how chess works. So Magnus can, you know, try to get a couple of breaks in the middle, but he plays a little bit too hesitant, like bishop back to d6, and here Ding plays a very high-level positional idea. You are more than welcome to try to find it. After this, there are big problems for black. If you say something like e4, I understand why you say that. The idea, of course, being take, and mate in a couple of moves. Yeah, black just plays knight f6. There's no mate. Not to mention that actually after e4, it's well known in these positions that e5 is very good. And yeah, everything's going to get traded, and no one's going to be better there. If anybody's going to be better, actually, it's black. Believe it or not, because what is that? Like, what is that bishop doing? Black actually just has more activity. No. Very nice idea here. c5 and f4, and Magnus cannot move. He can't move. He no longer has either of the thematic pawn breaks in the position, and frankly speaking, he can't even go backwards. This knight cannot go backwards. Like, if you try, okay, in this position to play like knight g8 and f6, I mean, Ding will just play a bunch of moves and destroy you on the queen side. By the time you successfully play the move e5, all I have to do is like move out of the way. And then it's not even like, okay, what's next? What's next? You play e4, I go back, I continue to smash your queen side. So, all right, bishop a5, played by Magnus, and this allows a tactic. And I'm sure Magnus saw this tactic. He just thought that I gotta do something. I can't just sit around. He plays bishop a5. Now that bishop is hanging, it's loose. With this move, knight takes d5. Ding here grabs a pawn against the world champ, and he takes the bishop, and what Magnus does here is immediately plug the center. So Magnus is saying, my knights are better than the bishops in a close position. I'm going to play knight to e4, and then I'm going to lock things up with f5. And that's kind of exactly what happens. Ding does something hilarious, though. So you'll notice that, there we go, Magnus has plugged the center completely, right? So Ding can't do anything. So if you can't do anything in the center, you got to do something on the sides of the board, right? Watch what Ding does. So first he transfers the rooks over, makes Magnus play very passive defense. Now Ding plays something disgusting. He just walks his king in the middle of the game to the queen side. Just king f1, king e2, king d1, king c1. I love this. Look at this. King c1, and a couple moves later, king b1. That is not a fork. Bishop is there. Great. Congrats, Ding. In fact, h6, Magnus is maybe looking to do something over here. Maybe Ding's gonna walk his king to a2. I don't know, I haven't seen the game. No way, he actually does it. Ding just walked his king to the opposite side of the board. I love this. I feel like only Ding would do this against Magnus. Just middle of the game, king on a2. Why? Because that is where it's safest. Because the king's not safe, all right? Any other part of the board, things are about to open up, and they are. Magnus launches a violent counterattack down that side of the board. How did Ding know that was going to happen? And actually, you got to be real careful, because the only place you can break through right now, it is not working. So this insane idea to sack a pawn and create a fortress, very stockfish-like, I must say. Which is why, which is exactly why the video is called what it's called. But now Ding has another opening. So Ding is now trying to go to that side of the board. All right, knight back to g8. But how exactly is that? How's he going to break through? Knight d2. Bishop g... Oh, he's going to sack material to remove the blockade of the center. And no matter where this knight goes, it's going to be taken. So h5 is falling. Beautiful idea by Ding. Knight takes b3, rook b3, and he just takes the knight. The knight was going to be the defender of the position, and now the defenses have fallen. Queen to h5, queen to e5, e4. We talked about this move a while ago to kind of wreck the position. Well, there it is. And yeah, I mean, Ding checks and just, look at just beating down the position. And yeah, DC, and he takes everything. I mean, he takes all of the pawns. And Magnus resigns because rook b7 is coming, as well as c7, rook d8, blah, blah, blah. And Ding Liren has just defeated Magnus Carlsen. I bet you that is not what you were expecting when you clicked on this recap. He takes revenge for the last time that they played in the playoffs. I think it was also a semifinals match. And he moves on to the finals to await the winner between Anish Giri and Pragg. Now, this match was completely bonkers. So in the second rapid game that they played, they went for a Grunfeld. Well, not they. I suppose Pragg just developed his pieces. Anish chose the Grunfeld. And a main line, so bishop c4, knight e2. You see in the Grunfeld, white can put the knight on f3. This bishop can go here, this bishop can go here, or here, or here. The queen can go here, blah, 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 blah. But this is one of the main lines. And here black chooses an approach, either b6 or knight c6, or the queen moves to a square, like rook goes to d8 or something. And then sometimes white also chooses multiple plans, whether to castle or not, whether to play h4, h5. So yeah, we'll see. Anish chooses knight c6, putting more pressure. Now this is defended. b6, so a combination of some plans. Maybe the queen will come here, and now h4. So I mean, Pragg is like, all right, I'm just gonna try to destroy you. E6, blocking the light scored bishop. H5. Again, untrained eye. That's a free pawn. It's most certainly not a free pawn because you very quickly can just destroy black if they take. Anish plays queen to h4, and Pragg just gives him the e pawn. Like he just gives him the e4 pawn. And Anish is like, I don't quite understand. You're giving me the pawn? It almost looks like a mouse slip. It almost looks like Pragg wanted to play queen c2. But that's not what he wanted. He wanted to do this, and he now kicks the queen out of the middle, brings the bishop back, and it's not easy at all to play this position for black. Because bishop f3 is coming, and h6 is coming, so he shuts down the king side, right? So now the black king can't really move. Bishop f3, bishop c6, and now we see d5. This insane idea by Pragg of sacrificing a pawn to just demolish, shred open the position, is going to pay off because he has bishop d4. I almost think this was like 20 moves of prep. Like, maybe not specifically, but Pragg had this idea in mind where he temporarily goes down 2 pawns and completely shuts down all of black's play. And Pragg makes this look easy. He now picks up 1 pawn, but queen c3 is coming, queen b2, and it's maybe mate on g7. And that pawn on h6 is a killer. Look at this, queen d2. If you take my bishop on f3, I go here and it's mate. It's mate because I just mate you on the back rank because of my h6 pawn, which just shows you the power of these flank pawn advancements. So that doesn't happen, queen e7, but Pragg still just violently throws tactics at Anish, and Anish is unable to deal with the infiltration. The rook sacrifice, if you take, then rook d7, and that's it. The game is over. And even though Anish just for a brief moment stops mate, he allows a different one. The bishop is going to b3 to meet the king. And Anish resigns. A 30-move demolition job by Pragg. Demolition. But we go to the final rapid game. This time, we have the same opening. Anish has to win on demand. He has to win this game or he's knocked out, and he plays a King's Indian defense. Now, like in a classical game nowadays, playing the King's Indian for a win is impossible. So if you have time to prepare for a classical game, you know, you're gonna refute things. So Anish doesn't even go for theory, and he's a theory, you know, monster. He plays c6 and then e5, and Pragg probably should just take. Like, he probably should take and trade queens, if I'm being completely honest. Just do not let Anish get anything that you want in a King's Indian. Just don't let him do it. Don't let him do it. Instead of that, Pragg decides to do the right thing against the King's Indian. The right thing, which is what the engine wants, which is to let the King's Indian player play the King's Indian out. Okay? Because the computer thinks that this is a terrible position. It's like +1, I'm better, you know, and what does Pragg do? Well, he just invites the attack. He's like, yeah, go ahead, attack me. I'm better on the queen side anyway. That's what the computer thinks in the King's Indian. It thinks that its attack on the queen side is stronger than black's attack on the king side. But Anish doesn't care about that. Look what he's doing. I mean, he's got the cannons ready to go. As a human, that looks horrifying. That looks absolutely horrifying to deal with. As an engine, the engine is completely unconcerned. I mean, honestly, the computer here thinks that white has like a +1 at position. It's just like, all right, so go ahead, play g5 so I can take your h-pawn, stupid. Like, play g4 so I can take the g-pawn, stupid. It just doesn't believe in the attack. So finally, Anish is like, okay, here we go. g5, I gotta go for it. I mean, it's this horrifying position, okay? Completely terrifying position. You know, Pragg just, he's doing what he thinks he's supposed to. I mean, look at this. Look at this position. Rook, queen, 2 bishops, g4 coming. Now, just so you folks understand, what, like, the real problem here for white, well, no, let's say white defends, you know, with the king. The real problem is that white has no defenders. Black is not interested in this move, although that might also win the game in the long run. I mean, black is just interested in, I mean, gh3, I mean, rook g7, queen h4. Like, the game is moments away from being over. So Pragg takes with his f-pawn and picks the pawn up, but Anish is open. He did what he had to do, right? So now Pragg has to trade queens. That is what Pragg apparently has to do here, is invite this queen trade, and if there's no queen trade, kind of get out of the way. He doesn't do that and instead tries to play active defense by taking on d6 and bringing the knight back. Anish here is winning with knight takes g4, queen h3, queen g5, and now has to play like knight takes b4, apparently. You might ask, isn't this a fork? Yes, it is. But black is not interested in winning material. Black is interested in mate. The problem for black is that if black trades too many pieces, all right, like even like the queens, this is a losing position for black. Black's entire game plan is not to win a rook for a knight, it's to mate. If this position does not end up in checkmate, it's over because white has way more space, way more weaknesses to capture. So Pragg catches Anish here with an incredible move, all right? Danger levels with knight f5. If you take my queen, I check you, I win your queen. So suddenly, with like 30 seconds on the clock each, it's back to equal. Anish had some win, it was some absurd engine line, it doesn't matter, we don't have to look at it. Pragg defense, all right? We have king f7, knight h4, check, king h1, and g3. And I mean, Pragg is about to reverse this whole thing on Anish. In this position, after queen f6, white has the absolutely incredible bishop takes e5. If you take this somehow, I'm going to take on f4 with check. So queen e5, I can even take the knight. So let's say knight moves out of the way. Rook f4, queen f4, gf4, rook h4. Okay, black is winning. What Pragg had to do here was play rook f1, which is very tough to see. Very tough to see that you don't even take. You go with 30 seconds on the clock. Instead of that, Pragg goes here, and it all falls apart. So Anish's center blockade stays together. Now he has, what is that, 17 points of material attacking the king all at once, and he just swarms. And yeah, now that knight is also arriving. It's really bad. You can give a couple of checks, but there's no more checks. You give one check. And yeah, Anish arrives, knight d3, mate. Look at that. The horses and the rook. I mean, a brutal beatdown by Anish. I mean, he got mad. He got mad in this rapid game, and that sends this matchup to the blitz. All right? So we have to play 2 games of blitz to determine who's going to face Ding Duren in the finals. Now we have e4. The colors are reversed, so Anish is going for an Italian. Gioco pianissimo, you know, nothing special. We're not going to get into the intricacies of the position, but things start to get fun in this game right here as Anish plays d4 and Pragg takes and plays d5. So first the center is being clarified. Okay, so it's isolated pawn for white, trying to blockade this bishop with the knight. Maybe this bishop will come around to b8. We'll see what happens. All right, Anish plays bishop d2. Pragg makes the blockade stronger. Queen c2, threatening rook e6 and this, so that would be a horrible, horrible thing to give away. 2 pieces for the rook. Rook e8, defending, and bishop b8. Now, I have actually seen Anish lose a few games like this. I think he lost the game pretty similar to Tabatabai in the Grand Prix, if I'm not mistaken, where Tabatabai just got a mammoth attack on him in these e4, e5s. And so what Pragg does here is he takes the knight, which is kind of nuts. But I think he wanted that knight to not get to h5 because then it would be providing some problems for him. So then he just plays knight back to f8. And I mean, Anish just can't really break through here. And Black's defense is very strong. Very strong. The knight on d5, the bishop on e6. So Anish tries, okay? Pragg replaces his blockade with a bishop, okay? And then we have a trade, and we have the knights coming forward to e6 and d6. Position is still very much in the balance, okay? Bishop e3 defense, queen e7, bringing the rook. The rook has been brought. Queen c1, it's kind of clear maybe what we want here, right? Potentially, maybe knight g4 we see. f6. Knight goes forward attacking the queen. Queen slides over to f7. And Anish Giri defends his knight. Defends his knight! But he doesn't defend his knight. Because in this position, there is bishop to e4. It's just a fork. If you play knight e5, I take your queen, you take mine, I take back. And that's exactly what happened. And Anish Giri resigned the game. Just like that. One move, fork by black. Pragg defends well, wins the match. Yep. Insane. Pragg is a finalist in the Chessable Masters. He is taking on Ding Liren. And I mean, what more to say? Go Pragg. You know the craziest thing about Pragg? He finishes his games in these events by 2 in the morning. By 8 in the morning, he has to be in school to take his board exams. So he has to take the final exams of his grade, and then he has to come back home, prepare, maybe take a nap, and then play Ding Liren or Anish Giri. I mean, it's unbelievable. He just beat Wei Yi in Pragg. I mean, he just beat Wei Yi and Anish Giri. Congratulations to him. Massive, massive congratulations. This kid is incredible. And I will see you all back here for a final recap where both players who were not the favorites beat their opponents. So congrats to both, and we'll see you for the finals. Get out of here.